We discussed yesterday that Lance Hurd could be potentially renegotiating his NIL deal because he realizes how much that he is needed for Tennessee's football team. He had the bum ankle last week, practiced. A lot of people thought he would play. That is total and utter nonsense based off a couple of different sources that I've talked to. So take that off the board. He is not looking for more money in the middle of the season, as some people have hinted at. And I'm going to go ahead and say shame on some Knoxville media. I'm not calling anybody out specifically. And I don't even think you maybe meant it intentionally. But when somebody asks a question on a message board and you don't answer it, and you usually do answer it, whatever question it might be about Tennessee's football team, it can leave the implication that Lance Hurd has done something wrong. Okay. Would you agree with that, Caleb? That there's ways to manipulate things, especially on a message board, to make things look one way or another, right?
Yeah, and it's a matter of fact, and it's one of the worst things that people do in this media sphere is they gaslight you to pretend that they're not floating something, and then they float something like, I'm just asking questions. It's like, no, you're trying to lead people to think a certain way. I mean, I see that all the time in politics where people will drop a horrible conspiracy theory that has no bearing in fact. I mean, like, I'm not saying this is true. I'm just asking questions. And it's like, well, okay, but stand on it then. Be honest about how you feel about it.
No. Okay. And here's how I feel about it. Do I think an agent or representation has gotten involved? Yes, I do, based off who I've talked to. However, I don't think that's a bad thing. And let me give you a story before you want to throw Lance Hurd under the bus. Do you remember a linebacker? I know you will. You remember everybody, Caleb. Jason Mitchell.
Oh, yeah. I remember him.
Okay. Let me tell you a story about Jason Mitchell. Because as a reporter, the last thing you ever want to do is get involved with a team, right? I mean, you don't want to affect the outcome whatsoever. So when Jason Mitchell came in front of the media and said, I'm going to play on Saturday after verifying that he had a torn ACL, is the one time that I wanted to pull a player aside and say, dude, you're being a great guy. I understand that. They don't have depth at linebacker, but don't do this to yourself. Okay, Jason Mitchell's knee was so shredded by the end of his final year at Tennessee because he played on a torn ACL. He got no chance to play in the NFL. You can check it. If he did play some, he played very little. His knee was garbage, even if he had the mobility that he once had. And I would argue right now that Jason Mitchell's a lot closer to Kevin Burnett than you think when he was at his prime. But after he got hurt, Tennessee's coaches allowed him to play. Now, he doesn't have any NIL money. He's not a millionaire right now. He missed out on his shot because he was allowed to play. And the notion that came from that coaching staff was, well, if he wants to go out there and do it, that's up to him. No, you don't allow that guy to play. Because he might, theoretically affect a game by a couple of points at best. By the way, he was hobbled around, and his backup, whoever it was at the time, Caleb, you might remember, at 100% would have been a better option. I can't remember his name. Nevertheless.
Maybe Jerron Mayo that year? 05?
Why don't you Google that and check? So, listen, we hear this term agent, and we all get scared and we all get nervous that college football is changing massively. And it is and has. But what if there's a situation in which the parent steps up? That is technically a representation, and somebody should have done that in Jason Mitchell's case. That's representation. So what is wrong if an agent did get involved and said, listen, Lance, you've got a long time to play. One of these ankle sprains can last the whole year and affect what you put on tape. Now, he's not a year from playing in the NFL, so feel free to pick apart that argument, if you will. If he's a senior, it would maybe be a little bit different. But I understand not sending him out there and somebody in his camp saying he shouldn't go out there. Caleb, there's too much money at stake. And there's the young man's health. Now, the flip side is he's gotten his $1 million, which is what I was told. And he's gotten his $1 million and he should buck up and play. Well, Caleb, I mean, if you are incredibly, I mean, I know you're under the weather today, but if you're hurt and like physically devastated, if your fingers are broke, nobody's going to make you write anything at Off the Hook Sports. So I'm very frustrated by some media out there that I believe know more and know what I know and don't want to report that because it could look like Tennessee's coaching staff is pushing Lance Hurd to get back on the field too soon. And who does that remind you of? I thought that might be the situation with Cooper Mace. Now you're saying, oh, you could talk to Cooper on the ball report. No, he's never once told me that, hand to God, not once. And I specifically didn't ask him because I didn't want to know. But I do believe that they wanted him back sooner than his family thought he should be back. So Caleb, that's the coach's job, is to get the best players on the field. And Josh Heupel loves his players, but he also probably despises Oklahoma for what happened there. And you're telling me if it's 50-50 or even 51% he shouldn't play, 49% he should, that Josh Heupel wouldn't say encourage him to play? Are you telling me that's not at all possible? That does not make Josh Heupel a bad guy.
No. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. My diatribe will continue, but
well, I want to clear this up first. So what you're saying is there was no like demanding more NIL. There was just Lance Hurd was banged up, and he didn't want to go because he didn't want to risk further injuring himself.
Yes, and some representation has gotten involved, but I don't care if that's somebody paid or a parent. I've seen situations where parents got more in the way than an agent ever will. I mean, a mom seeing her little son knocked around and playing injured, you don't think she's more dangerous to team culture than an agent? I'll go ahead and tell you. It's the mom.
Or a dad who thinks their son should be playing more than he is. Or a mom who thinks her son should be playing more than he is. Honestly, yes. We know that. A mom who trashes every other player in the position group room with that one player, Jalen Hurd. Okay, so anyways, I'm going to add this. I'm with you. I see nothing wrong with it. Josh Heupel's going to look out for what he's got to do. Lance Hurd's going to look out for what he's got to do. And also, I think for this, here's the other part of this. Now, Tennessee got by, but I think Josh Heupel was really worried about the matchup issue with Oklahoma. So he probably felt that's the type of game where it's worth playing if you're 50%, and then you can rest after. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And now I will say that by getting out of that game with him not playing, I'm going to say this, Dave. Lance Hurd did Josh Heupel and Tennessee a favor. Tennessee needs him 100% against Alabama and Georgia. Don't you want him to get fully healthy so he can go block for Nico against those two teams?
Well, and I want to be very clear because that was brought up on the message board. That could well be the case. But my point is, they could have sat him and not took him on the trip and lied to subscription-based media that like to cover up for missteps along the way, or maybe him misdiagnosing Lance Hurd, or maybe they think he should have played. So the lack of clarity is the problem here. I'm not accusing whatsoever Josh Heupel of saying that, hey, Lance Hurd has got to play on Saturday. This is my alma mater. This is Oklahoma. But every coach wants every guy that's on the cusp of being healthy to play. I doubt there was a conversation at all that, this is a big game. You got to get out there. In fact, the conversation may have been, let's rest you this week. Then you get a bye week and you're good. And with a high ankle sprain, that may have been the case. Those for a big guy, he will not be over the high ankle sprain for the rest of the year. I don't care if he takes a month off. For big guys, Caleb, it just doesn't happen. So he benefits Tennessee long term by not playing. And I'm dismayed, very dismayed by some people that have hinted that maybe he just wants more money or that the agent being involved is a bad thing. Go ask Jason Mitchell if he would have liked an agent during his playing days, because he probably would have had a career in the NFL.
Yeah, and it's about time that college players could get agents. They had that stupid rule where if you had representation, you were automatically ineligible. For how long did they have that rule? I mean, Dante Stallworth gets an agent for like 1 day, wants to come back, and the NCAA says he can't come back. Did that happen in 2000?
Or he has to sit 4 games, I think was the penalty. And so he decided to go on. That whole thing was stupid. And we just associate the term agent with being a bad thing. If this guy's looking out for Lance Hurd's best intentions, what's more important? Be honest and look into your heart. A 19-year-old's health or the Tennessee-Oklahoma game?
Yeah, and it's obviously the 19-year-old's health. And by the way, I got news for you Tennessee fans, and I got news for you college football fans everywhere. Root for your college. You should love it. Cheer. It's all fun. It's all great. I mean, it's an epic thing to be a part of. These kids play college football primarily to think about their future. And
nowadays, especially,
yeah. But that was largely a culture. You don't think most of the 98 team was thinking, how am I going to get to the NFL? Of course they were, because everybody thinks that way that's playing college ball. There's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't mean you still can't have good team chemistry, a great team overall, great coaching, all of that. But guys, players are, I'm sorry, college football is always going to be a sport where you're less willing to sacrifice your body than the NFL, because the NFL is the prize overall. And by the way, you see players in the NFL do this. How often do NFL players, Dave, on teams shut themselves down if they're on a contract year and they're a little banged up? They do it all the time.
Yep. I'm gonna back Lance Hurd on this one. Err on the side of not playing, or Josh Heupel, who could have very well said, Lance, you don't need to be playing because Georgia and Alabama are coming up. I don't know. I'll tell you that part. I don't know. I'm not just going to leave it on a message board for you to guess. I'm going to tell you I don't know that part. What I know is that he wasn't trying to go after more NIL money, as some people have hinted. That to me it's just been, it besmirches his character. Listen, I'll tell you how this thing works itself out. If his teammates believe that he's sitting unnecessarily, then he will lose his credibility with his teammates. And then at that point, maybe he doesn't play because his teammates don't like him. That's how the 98 team was. They would go up and say, this dude's dogging it, don't play him. And the coaching staff wouldn't play him. So I think the coaching staff believes in their leaders and would do that here as well.
Yeah, wasn't there a running back that was talking a lot of trash and then Al Wilson purposely laid him out because he was sick?
Travis Kozart.
That was his name? Okay.
Mm-hmm. I think, am I right there? I think I'm right. Maybe somebody can correct me on the message board. He was like the most highly rated running back in the history of man.
And Al Wilson purposely came around and wanted to knock him out.
Was it Brian Darden? Yes, it was
Maybe Brian Darden.
Okay.
That name sounds familiar.
I'll maybe text Jimmy during the break on that. But that's where I am with the Lance Hurd situation. And I think you need to back the young man. This is the time to show a young man love. It's not when he's Jalen Hyatt streaking down the field and scoring 15,000 touchdowns and beating Alabama. That's the easy time. The hard time for Lance Hurd is right now. Do you think he showed up to Tennessee after getting beaten out by 2 offensive tackles at LSU? And you think he showed up thinking, I'm going to sit the bench my first year?
Yeah, no, he obviously didn't think that. And he knows that and guys, remember this. You bring this up, Dave, he can't afford to shut himself down because his college tape is going to be what gets him to the NFL. He's not some high school prospect that you see. How many high school prospects have you seen, Dave, in football? It's like they were 5 stars and you're like, oh, they're just going to have to bide their time in college for 3 years because they're NFL stars. They're going to be NFL stars. you don't think that until you see their college play, right? It's not like basketball.
No, it's true. Every high school player with 3 stars next to their name thinks they're going to the NFL and they're going to start immediately.
And have you ever seen one that like that kid's an NFL player coming out of high school? I don't think I've ever seen one.
Have I ever seen a player that could skip college? Is that what you're asking me?
No, that not necessarily skip, but you knew that they were just biding their time. You knew they would just be biding their time in college because they were going to be that good once they get to the pros.
Alvin Kamara.
Okay, that I could see that. But for
he never griped. He never griped. Why? Because he perhaps had less tread on his tire than some other people. I don't know how much he played in junior college, but he didn't care to play second fiddle. He was all smiles. It didn't bother him at all. And he played second fiddle to Jalen Hurd, I believe, because Jalen Hurd got some financial inducement to come to Tennessee, and he would flip on Butch Jones at the time. But Alvin Kamara was fine. He was fine with it.
But the point being, that's way less common in football than basketball, right? With a player like that.
Yes.
Like you have to put on college tape to get drafted.
Absolutely. Absolutely.